Last night, I completed my quest to watch every Academy Award Best Picture winner. I've watched a lot of films over the last few months, and I am very much looking forward to leaving my flat. The question that will obviously arise if you tell people you're watching every Best Picture winner is, well, which one's the best, or which one's the worst? And when I answer this, I do a little bit of a trick. I restrict it to films that I watch specifically for this challenge. My favourite Best Picture winner will probably always be Return of the King because I'm basic. But I would have watched Return of the King anyway, even if it hadn't won Best Picture. So I'm restricting myself to ones that I watch specifically for this challenge. I would say my favourite, which I watched specifically for this, was A Man for All Seasons. The acting is amazing, the script is wonderful, it looks great. It's quite an alienating premise. It's quite hard to get a hold of. It's about a man struggling with very deeply held religious convictions, which I don't share and which I think very few people would share. But you automatically understand where he's coming from because of the strength of the writing, the strength of the performance. And it's also just very funny, which helps immensely with my enjoyment of a film. So, A Man for All Seasons, I would definitely say is one of the Best Picture winners. For the worst, I have two answers. The absolute worst is Around the World in 80 Days because it's over 3 hours long and does not have a single point to make. It is just a cameo fest, and most of the cameos are unrecognizable to modern audiences. I actually didn't understand what was going on until Frank Sinatra showed up. Frank Sinatra doesn't have any lines, by the way. He's just playing piano, and then he turns around and it's Frank Sinatra. Then I realized that the all the people that the camera had been lingering on were contemporary celebrities. So there is no enjoyment to that if you don't know who these people are, and for the most part, I didn't. And it's also fairly racist, which, but then I'd have to admit that most of them are fairly racist. The further back you go, although probably quite a few of the modern ones are also somewhat racist. Um, it is just boring. It's incredibly dull. Admittedly, some of the scenery looks nice, but I think yet again it is a victim of progress of technology. More people travel now. I mean, I have never been to India, and yes, some of the shots of India looked nice, but I don't feel that watching footage of people traveling is especially interesting. So I have to say, Around the World in 80 Days is pound for pound the worst. But special mention should go to Chariots of Fire, which Around the World in 80 Days is too long and dull, but does not really seem to think that it's about anything, whereas Chariots of Fire believes it's very important and very portentous, and it's not. It is not. It is, I think, quite a mindless film. I really, really hated it. What I was saying about A Man for All Seasons, deeply held religious convictions, there is the same plot point in Chariots of Fire, but you just do not understand why the characters are acting the way they are. I think just the scripting and the acting is not as good, and the overall story just isn't as compelling. The stakes are not as high. I don't really care who wins the Olympics. I still don't now. I definitely don't care who won in the 1920s. So it really was a slog. Chariots of Fire, I cannot recommend on any level, which is a shame because it has Ian Holm in it. I love Ian Holm, but no, no. But I don't want to just focus on the negative. There are a lot of good films in there, and there are a lot of films that I just simply wouldn't have watched. Stuff like The Lost Weekend, All Quiet on the Western Front, even more modern things like The Hurt Locker, which I probably would have never picked up because I'm not a huge fan of war films, and a lot of the winners are war films. It felt to me like war films were the most represented genre in the best picture winners. That might just be because I don't watch war films, so that was the larger genre that I had to tackle when undertaking this challenge. But I do feel that that war films are disproportionately represented in the best picture winners. Um, and yeah, I feel that a lot of them are fairly similar in construction. There's not really a single one that's like, you know what, war's fine. Everyone should just go to war all the time. Admittedly, that would be not a particularly relatable message, but at least would be saying something different. Anyway, the uniting factor, if you decide to undertake this challenge yourself, if you decide to watch every Best Picture winner, what you're going to find is that almost all of them are too long. Most of them are over 2 hours. This very few films have enough plot to be longer than 2 hours. I feel certainly very few of the Oscar winners, very few of the Best Picture winners, convince me otherwise. Over 2 hours is too long. Um, they could lose half an hour. They could lose an hour. It really wouldn't hurt anything. But there are a lot of gems in there, and it's interesting as well just to see what different eras defined as Best Picture worthy. In the beginning, there were a lot more comedies. There were a lot more stage related. I felt like a lot of the early Best Picture winners were centered around theaters and theatrical ideas, probably just because of how early film was constructed. So it's interesting to see how that's evolved. There was much less focus on social issues, which is now one of the big, big things you need if you want to be a Best Picture winner. Is you need to have some kind of relevance to a contemporary issue. Unless you're Birdman, at which point you can be about whatever the hell you like. Uh, Also, another uniting factor, the acting is normally top notch. There are a few films, for example, Kramer versus Kramer or Terms of Endearment, uh, Gentleman's Agreement, which I feel mainly won because of the acting, because people are like, wow, those are some really good performances. And they are, they always are, but I want more than just good performances in my Best Picture winners. I also want a compelling story and a good script, and I feel that oftentimes that is not there. And finally, how you end is very important to the Best Pictures. A lot of them end with, yeah, that classic Oscar-worthy death scene where, someone's on their deathbed and they give a big speech about life and moving on, and then they pass, and then there's some shots of everyone else grieving so that they can also get nominations, and then a shot at the end of something hopeful. Maybe we can move past grief and then end. That is how a lot of them end, and I feel that's important. It really does matter how you finish your film, that because that will be what most people take away. So you if you get the ending right, it doesn't really matter what the middle is about as long as the acting is good for the most part. Now, I just wanted to quickly mention the weirdest Oscar winner, because that is really what I was interested in, was what different eras define as Best Picture worthy, and what is, to my mind, the greatest digression from the usual. And maybe it's just because it's very recent, but I would have to say that The Shape of Water, to me, is the oddest winner. I mean, there are only two fantasy films that have won, Shape of Water and The Lord of the Rings, although I would point out that both Ben-Hur and Hamlet also feature fantastical elements, although nobody classes them as fantasy. But more than that, the other fantasy films, Lord of the Rings, Hamlet, Ben-Hur, all fit within other genres that often win: war films, epic films, films with lots of battles, lots of very high, manly emotional stakes, whereas The Shape of Water is much more low key and it's much more philosophical and elegant than that. So I'm very excited that The Shape of Water won, because I hope that it leads to an era where more interesting films can be nominated, can win, because there is there has been a lot of heterogeneity over the past few decades, and that's a shame. I feel like our era has possibly the most boring defining feature of all our Best Picture winners. We don't have the epics of the 50s or the kind of noir of the 40s. We just have people complaining for a long time. But there's always hope. And now I've watched all of them, and I'm not going to watch another film for quite a while, because I want to go outside. I want to see the world. I hear there's a lot going on out there. Okay, see you soon. Bye.